Oral questions.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
WTF.
Hey everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
The one we call Canadians.
But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right, elbows up. Elbows up.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. We have issues in Canada, right? Unless you're completely head in the sand, be aware of this.
Oh, yeah. And now, oral questions, questions orales.
Oral questions, questions orales.
Let's see what's happening in the House of Commons right now. Clown circus at the sausage factory. Let's go.
Questioning, Madame Dancho, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you to the witnesses for being here. Appreciated your opening remarks. Mr. Luprecht, I'll start with yours. And sort of, you kicked off a lot of the things I wanted to ask you about today in your opening remarks. But I was listening to you. I believe it was in June. You were on the Line podcast, and I encourage others to listen to it. You gave quite a robust assessment of where we're at and where we need to be. And I did want to just pull on one of the comments you'd made. I thought it was quite informative that you touched on earlier. You said the Prime Minister is going to have to sell Canadians on a grand new bargain, a new social contract, where we're going to build pipelines to export hydrocarbons, in particular to our allies, to some extent in Asia, but particularly Europe, because effectively we need to explain to Canadians that we've been subsidizing Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine by keeping energy prices high in Europe because we're refusing to export hydrocarbons. And we're going to use that revenue to pay for defense, and you went on to say other things as well. So can you elaborate further for the committee it sounds like you believe that exporting, having pipeline infrastructure to export to Europe and other places would be key to a defense industrial strategy. Is that a fair assessment of what you said? And if you could elaborate?
Well, we're going to need to pay for it somehow. We've all seen the debt and the structural deficit that we have. And so if we're not prepared to raise taxes, we're only prepared to make modest concessions on cuts to services. And we don't completely we want to maintain our AAA credit rating. And I always point out that if Canada joined the European Union, it would be the 6th country in the European Union with a AAA credit rating. So AAA credit ratings are in high demand among allies. So it's in our interest to preserve that so we can borrow at lower rates. Then this is the way to generate the revenue. And I think we can do this in a way to bring all Canadians on board, because with this revenue, as I say, we can pay for new social services, we can pay down the debt, we can pay for defense, and we can pay for the energy transition. So I think we can all win.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then on the comments that you made about the importance of supporting our allies in Europe, and one of those tools, not only just being what we typically think in defense, but also supporting them with exporting gas to Europe. Can you comment on the importance of that?
So I just spent 6 months in Brussels and had considerable opportunity to exchange with some of the key leadership, including on the Commission and the European Parliament. If you go around European capitals, what is the challenge? That energy prices, being 2 to 4 times as high, are not just undermining Europe's competitiveness. they are fundamentally undermining European democratic institutions because just like in Canada, but only to a much higher degree, people are frustrated with the prices that they are paying. So we are not just supporting our European allies in their efforts to keep their economies competitive, we are also protecting their democratic integrity. And by being idiosyncratic about our hydrocarbons and our critical minerals, we are undermining our own geostrategic interests because we are not delivering for what is key for European allies. And of course, for decades, we have used European allies to counteract the vagaries of U.S. unilateralism. The silence by European partners has been stunning when our sovereignty, political and economic, has been threatened by a U.S. administration. And that is because we have not delivered. And I think we can strike a bargain that delivers for both us and for our European allies and preserves what has made us safe, prosperous and democratic for the last 75 years.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just switching gears a little bit, you'd also mentioned on another podcast, the Breaker podcast, quote, "I think we have learned that China can never be counted on as a trusted partner, and so that we will always need to hedge on that relationship." So, Mr. Luparc, what do you think of this sort of recent rapprochement between Prime Minister Carney and the Communist Party in Beijing? How do you think that impacts our defense and security policy?
Supposedly, if we're a middle power and we have interests to assert, although I think we've been using, in terms of our GDP, we've not been leveraging our middle power status internationally. Clearly, China is a country we will always have to work with. But I think China has shown itself time and again not to be a trustworthy partner and not to be a trustworthy ally. And given our trade relationship with China, I think we have an opportunity to push back and to stand up for ourselves. And I think other allies, such as Australia, have done that much more systematically and strategically than Canada has.
Mm-hmm. So really on the defense industrial strategy, you also feel, from my assessment of what you're saying, is not only should we be considering energy as part of that, but our foreign policies obviously should be key to when we're thinking about our defense, which I think is obvious, but I think we need that as part of this report, so I appreciate you putting this on the record. But just further to that, you'd also said that, in Canada, instruments of statecraft have really atrophied, and our international reputation has taken a hit, and Canada's government instead embraced sort of a values-based foreign policy. In effect, it made foreign policy an extension of domestic policy. You went on to say that we've let our allies down on things that matter, energy, security, defense, and investments in the defense industry. And you went on to also link that to what you said earlier, that the European allies aren't really coming to our defense with the U.S. So just in the concluding few seconds, just again driving home the point of tying this all together, how important it is for the strategy. Thank you.
Canada and allies pay 2 to 4 times as much per piece of equipment that we procure than the United States because we don't have the economies of scale. Now, NATO works by national defense procurement ecosystems, but there are opportunities for collaboration that are not just about the sort of innovation that my colleagues have talked about, but that are also ensuring that we get the best return, the best value for money for the Canadian taxpayer. And I think our European colleagues are very much able to underwrite some of the key critical infrastructure and major projects investments that we are looking to make in Canada in return for us delivering for them. And we can do this with long-term 20, 30-year contracts, the way other allies have done this, in a way that requires relatively little government investing and provides the sort of security also for the capital that is being invested that will generate the collective payoffs that we're all looking for. So that's what a strategy is about. What are our ends? What are the ways available, and what are the means to finance that? And we need to do this in collaboration, in particular with our European partners.
Thank you very much, Madame Dancho. Mr. Baines, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today on this important study. I'm going to go to Mayor Hendrickson. If I can talk a little bit about what we've learned from yesterday's budget. There's proposes to spend $1 billion over 4 years starting this year. to Transport Canada, creating Arctic Infrastructure Fund. This will invest in major transportation projects. I know you talked a little bit about that in your opening statements. And we heard a lot about the dual use applications for civilian and military use, including airports, seaports, all-season roads, highways. If you can speak a little bit to that, and as a representative of Richmond, British Columbia, there's major investments that have been made that come out of what's some of the defense capabilities, everything from the Poseidon aircraft, which also has Arctic capabilities, icebreakers in our Seaspan shipyards in Vancouver, and a marine industry that's very important to our province of British Columbia and, of course, this country, and also the Sky Guardian drone, which also has Arctic capabilities, and it's also something that's being assembled in partnership with MDA Space, which has the geospatial intelligence capabilities, a lot of the AI pieces that Ms. Instant spoke about. So taking all of those investments that you've heard about, plus the recent ones that have been announced, and maybe as the representatives of Yellowknife, if you could talk about specific projects that you think will be helpful to the region and other infrastructure projects you might want to see up there.
Sure. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I think when we look at it from a northern perspective, it's hard for a lot of southern Canadians, if you've never been north, as somebody who was born in southern Canada and moved north, it's a mind shift to understand the scope of our landscape in the north. And I think something that maybe to take it back even is the last major infrastructure investments in the north was the 1950s and 60s, when the federal government was investing heavily in northern infrastructure. And that's where we need to see again. And when we look at the defense industrial strategy and what that could be, Mr. Van Duyn talked about, we are a strategic location. We already have JTFN headquartered in Yellowknife, Joint Task Force North. We have a strong connection with the military. Many Yellowknifers are members of the military or have family in the military. When we look at the infrastructure needs of the North from a community perspective and looking at the dual use aspect, we have the Mackenzie Valley Highway is one piece of infrastructure that's been talked about for decades. We have the Arctic Economic Security Corridor, which is sort of the modern name. It often used to be called the Slave Geological Province Corridor. And the reason it used to be called that is because that is where the critical minerals in our territory are found in that region in vast quantities. But one of the challenges of accessing those is a lack of infrastructure. And that also leads to potential opportunities to also link in communities that would be along that road. And when we look at the diamond mining industry that is on a planned wind down at this time, as Mr. Van Duyn was noting, there are significant populations that work in those diamond mines that will be looking for new employment opportunities. These are skilled individuals who have the ability to build Canada. These are also diamond mining companies that have infrastructure that they're leaving behind and looking to divest. And that's opportunities along that the Arctic Economic Security Corridor that there's potential for Government of Canada to work with those companies on transferring assets that could be of use to the government from a security standpoint in the Arctic region. Ultimately, I think it's important to understand for northern infrastructure that where things can be dual use in southern Canada, often, as I mentioned, they can be triple, quadruple, or often quintuple use. There's always multiple ways of using infrastructure in the north from a community aspect, from a mitigation and adaptation to environment, climate change, to the military purposes that we're discussing here. Yellowknife has a beautiful, in my opinion, cold climate, and that really does lend itself to cold weather testing and consistency that is not always available in other places. Combined with a city in terms of Yellowknife, we have the highest disposable incomes in the country. We have a very educated population ready to serve our country in different ways, but we need the investments to make that happen. And it's good to see as a Northerner that the government is turning its eyes our way.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to get another quick question. And we had a witness here, Madeline Redford, spoke about, she was the Northern Director of Can-Arctic Networks, talked about the need to be climate change proofed. What we often saw was that extra 10% in infrastructure project to climate change proof was well worth the investment. Do you agree to this?
Yeah, I mean, she would have better stats on it than I would, but as a former mayor of Iqaluit, she knows these issues very well. The extra investment in terms of climate change proofing is incredibly important. Our communities, as you know, from Yellowknife, we evacuated in 2023 due to wildfire threats. We've had several communities evacuate and move again this year, flooding. The biggest fear that I always have is what happens with our infrastructure, especially power generation, if it fails on a -35, -40 day. So in making sure that our infrastructure is climate proof generally is an extremely important thing. And I think that those extra investments are always important for the government of Canada to recognize, because ultimately not climate proofing our infrastructure will often cost us more in the long run anyway, as we respond to those emergencies rather than planning for them.
Climate proof.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. I'm sure glad the committee can
Into the next.
reunite you two today as we are, so this is great. Mr. Barrett, you've got the floor for 6 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Let's go, Mike Barrett.
I'll start with
I think
you,
Leslie Church is next.
Professor Stark, you've made comments that ethics rules should protect the public trust. I think that that's incredibly important when we're at a time with a public that sees their trust in democratic institutions and elected officials at all-time lows. We need to find ways to bolster public confidence. Would adding apparent or potential conflicts of interest to the Act close a loophole that currently allows compliance? And do you think that in doing so, it would address the concern that when the public currently sees a conflict, they feel like there's no action being taken?
I think that adding a clause mentioning or prohibiting the appearance of a conflict of interest is a good idea, as long as it's understood what the appearance of a conflict of interest is. So if a conflict of interest itself arises when an official is in a position to affect their interests, even if they actually are uninfluenced by them, then the appearance of a conflict of interest is when they appear to be in a position where their interests could affect their judgment. So an example of that from the United States arose when the controller of the currency many years ago divested all his shares in federal banks, which fell under his jurisdiction. But he was accused of being in a conflict of interest because he still had shares in state banks, whose interests he could not affect in office, but it was deemed to be an appearance of a conflict of interest because the public might not make that distinction. It's a finer notion, the appearance of a conflict of interest, but certainly I think that officials have an obligation to avoid not simply a conflict of interest, but the appearance of such, or to put it another way, their conduct should pass muster even with the most casual observer, meaning somebody who really doesn't pay great attention to the details, might misunderstand them, and his obligation is still to make sure they don't draw that conclusion.
To pick up on something that you said with respect to your example about the financial interests of these public office holders, it's been suggested that a prime minister could sell controlled assets and then have the proceeds reinvested by a trustee who is independent from and free from the direction of the public office holder. Why not do that?
That's I see no reason for not doing that. That's a way of resolving an actual conflict of interest. What you're describing is a blind trust where the office holder puts their assets gives them to a trustee, and the trustee is directed to liquidate them as soon as reasonable, that is, as soon as the trustee can find a buyer for them, and to reinvest them in instruments that the office holder does not know the identity of. Of course, it can take some time for the trustee to do that. So during the period before the trustee has managed to sell a particular asset, the office holder, especially if it's the Prime Minister or another senior office holder, should recuse themselves or be screened from any involvement with that asset. Once it's sold, then it's no longer an interest of theirs, and there's no reason for them to be recused from matters dealing with that asset.
When public office holders are screened from being involved in discussions or taking decisions on matters that put them in a conflict that could see them benefit their own financial interests, should there be public reporting that has occurred, so that there is that visibility again for the sake of public confidence that the system is working? The concept of it sounds fine, but the public doesn't have visibility on if and when it's used, and it might seem to strain. It might seem to strain most people's trust again if they hear that it's going to be employees of or appointees of that public office holder who are protecting them from that involvement, and that the decisions, if you had, the current Prime Minister, as the example I will use, has extensive holdings in a company that's invested in transportation and infrastructure and military and power generation, all things that certainly the head of government would touch on in their role. So the question is, do you think there should be public reporting of when the screen is used?
I think that's something that the committee should consider, and I would agree with it depending upon what we're talking about. As I understand it, the Ethics Commissioner has set up a screen, as you describe it, where two officials in the Prime Minister's office are going to divert issues that might be part of the Prime Minister's portfolio from the Prime Minister's attention. But I think if that's all that happens, that's not enough. That for example, the Ethics Commissioner should meet periodically with those two officials to review what they have done. Perhaps there are other more hands-on ways in which the Ethics Commissioner can be. Sorry, yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're over time here, but
pardon me. Okay.
Maybe we can get back to it in a sec. Okay, Ms. Church.
Okay.
Ms. Church, 6 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to you both. Professor Stark, maybe let me pick up on, you were talking a little bit about perceptions of conflict and debunking the assumption that conflict of interest somehow is akin to corruption. And I think that that's actually a very neat way of getting to the heart of one of the issues that we've been wrestling with. Do you believe that perceptions of conflict, when they're not grounded in evidence, can undermine public trust? And how should legislators ensure that perceptions do not overshadow facts?
I think that perceptions can undermine public trust. And again, we're talking about situations where there isn't even an actual conflict of interest, let alone corruption, but the appearance of one. And I think that a provision in the conflict of interest legislation that requires office holders to take care to not allow the appearance of a conflict of interest to arise is helpful. The difficulty or the pushback on that, just so that everybody knows it, is that that's a very vague provision. And it's not necessarily the case that an office holder, and I can think of cases that involve both conservative and liberal governments, but I won't detail them here. But where officials did violate what would have been an appearance standard had there been one. But it's also obvious that they might not have reasonably anticipated that could have happened. So I think an appearance standard is important, but it's also important to make sure that the penalties that attach to it are appropriate, since there is a certain degree of vagueness attached to what it means.
Yeah, I would have to say I think that's where we are struggling a little bit, is to understand how to define that and how to reasonably conclude in the minds broadly of the public, in some of the examples that you raised, how to anticipate what is an appearance in someone's mind. It seems like a very subjective determination to be made, that's difficult to create boundaries in law to guide action. But maybe talk to me a little bit about, in your research, how important is it that conflict of interest determinations are made by independent institutions such as the Ethics Commissioner rather than through political debate or partisan narratives?
Before I answer that, let me just say one last thing on the appearance issue. I am less concerned about a vague law or a law or a provision in the law that simply prohibits the appearance of a conflict of interest, as long as we understand and as long as it's well understood that we've moved very far from accusing the official of any kind of corruption. So it's something they shouldn't do, but it should be like a Claudette Bradshaw situation. Sorry, I can see that I may have done something that appears to be a conflict of interest. I've taken action to correct that. It wasn't actually a conflict of interest, and the other side says, "Thank you. That's well done." And that's basically how it should work, if it can in politics. And I don't know if it can.
I was going to say, I think we all want to aspire to our better angels, but we may find some challenges there. Maybe, David, let me turn to you in terms of your lengthy experience in governance and at various levels of government. Maybe could you describe a little bit about how you've interacted with conflict of interest frameworks? Do you have experience administering screens or working with people who had screens or trusts, blind trusts, when you were working in government?
No, I have no particular experience working on with screens or blind trusts. As a designated public office holder, when I was in the federal government, in Minister Flaherty's office, then as President and CEO of the National Roundtable on the Environment and Economy, I had to, fill out my own forms and declare any particular conflicts and file all that stuff away. So that's really been my only direct experience.
Do you have any advice for us then, as we're thinking about how to shape and amend our conflict of interest laws, and ways that you think, given your experience, that we could protect public office holders and protect the public trust?
A few things, if I could. I mean, the principle that I tend to work with from being around politics and government and governance for quite a while is what Ronald Reagan used to say to Mikhail Gorbachev: trust but verify, as opposed to verify but trust. It's you have to have a starting point for this, and I think if we want to rebuild and recalibrate trust or renew trust in our system, we have to start with some semblance of trust at the outset. But you have to verify that, and that's why we have conflict of interest codes, lobbying rules, and all the associated public hygiene, if you will, for our public sector. I would suggest you might want to consider or take a look at what's been happening in Manitoba recently. So again, no surprise me from my experience there. There was a recent conflict of interest ruling against by the commissioner there against the premier and the former premier, former minister of finance, and former minister of the economy over violating the caretaker convention during the period between when the PC government lost and the NDP government was coming in. The conflict of the commissioner found that although there was not a private benefit to them, they had broken the rules and the law because they had ignored, if you will, that basic convention which governs our system, responsible government, etc. And the commissioner fined them. And the difference, a public fine of some, I think it was $18,000 in the case of the former premier, $10,000 or $12,000 for the former ministers. The Act allows for up to $50,000. So that's not insignificant. And so I would urge you to look at the nature of fines, because I think it conveys a really strong sense of a view on the matter at hand.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Professor Stark, you were quoted in a May 5th, 2025 article in the Financial Post stating that the primary remedies for conflict of interest are recusals, disclosure, and divestment. So just to clarify, you would consider these three to be the primary remedies of avoiding conflicts of interest?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Now, the Prime Minister has more than 500 reported conflicts of interest and 103 conflicts that are subject to the so-called ethics screen, conflicts related primarily to Brookfield. Now, it's the Prime Minister's position that decisions affecting Brookfield's interests wouldn't come to his desk, wouldn't come to his attention by virtue of the screen, but that isn't exactly true, given that the ethics screen only kicks in when a decision disproportionately impacts Brookfield's interests relative to other companies as part of a broad class. So consequently, that would give the Prime Minister fairly wide ambit to make decisions affecting Brookfield's interests, would it not?
Yes, and that is a terrific question, and it's one that I was going to suggest. It's one of two that I was going to suggest that the committee really should think about. The other being the involvement of the ethics commissioner beyond simply setting up a recusal regime, but continuing on. But the question of whether or not an official should be able to affect their interests if those interests are not disproportionate and are part of a broad class. That idea comes from American legislative ethics. And the idea is that if you're a legislator, you're voting on your legislation that's going to affect many, many people, not just you. And there are 400 other members of the legislature who are involved in the decision. It's not yours alone. Then it's okay for you to participate because you're being countered by others. It's been imported in Canada into our ethics regime for the executive branch, and I'm not sure it's legitimate to do that. But there is a pushback, which is if the Prime Minister can't even deal with broad issues that affect his interests co-equally with others, then we're getting into a situation where the Prime Minister is not able to really act in office. I've heard it said that the Prime Minister should simply liquidate his assets totally and put them in GICs or cash. But even then, of course, he can affect his own interests because he can affect in various ways the interest rate, etc. So some thought has to be given to where on the line from really disproportionately affecting your own interest to affecting your own GICs even. We should draw the line as to what constitutes a conflict of interest or not. And that's an important question. It's a philosophical question that I think the committee should wrestle with.
Now, do you think it's appropriate that the ethics screen is administered by, among others, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, who is answerable to the Prime Minister? Doesn't that create at least the perception of a potential conflict of interest?
I think that I think that what has to happen is that the ethics commissioner should be checking in regularly and reporting to Canadians, not the actual identity of assets, etc., but that they've checked in and that there were some issues here and they've been remedied, or et cetera, and if something serious did happen, then it's something the ethics commissioner should investigate. But it shouldn't. But I think the legislation, if you want my opinion, should require involvement of the ethics commissioner beyond simply setting up the blind trust, and then saying that's it, you guys go and manage it.
And as it stands, of course, the ethics commissioner isn't involved. He says, okay, Chief of Staff, you administer the ethics screen. We're supposed to trust the Chief of Staff and the Clerk of the Privy Council, both of whom are answerable to the Prime Minister, are doing this, but there is no reporting mechanism. There is really no information provided to demonstrate that the ethics screen is actually working. So would you agree that the Prime Minister, in the interests of transparency, should inform Canadians about how the ethics screen is in fact working on a day-to-day basis?
I would say that the Prime Minister could, and I think it would be a good move, voluntarily say that the Ethics Commissioner is being invited on a regular basis to review how the trust is operating, the screen is operating, and to make recommendations or to repair holes or to deal with issues that come up. And if he finds that a serious breach has occurred, that should be publicly known and it should be investigated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stark. Mr. Cooper. Mr. Saini, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, as the Chief of Staff to Honorable Brian Mulroney, to your knowledge, did Prime Minister had blind trust or screens at that time?
I don't recall. It wasn't part of my remit or role at that time to manage any of that, any of his personal, ethical or financial issues. So I couldn't tell you honestly.
Okay, Mr. Stark, when officials, whether they are civil servant or serving the public, take an oath of trust, is that not enough for us to accept that this is what they're doing? If we don't trust civil servant or the politician, how do we run the country? How do we manage? Or do we say anybody who is successful in business should be excluded? And that's not how democracy should work in our country.
I'll just refer to what David McLaughlin said, trust but verify. We should trust our officials, but it's important to have a conflict of interest regime and outside monitors to assist them. The ethics commissioner should not be seen as an opponent, but as someone who is helping and working with officials to establish trust. I don't think that a well-run conflict of interest regime should exclude people of wealth or who've done well in business from entering politics. There's no evidence that has happened in, for example, the United States, where until this current regime, which doesn't observe any of the conflict of interest laws excluded, where very wealthy people have found the privilege of serving in government worth putting their holdings in a blind trust for a while and haven't suffered, I don't think, financially as a result of that, or have recused themselves, then they can hold on to their wealth. They don't even have to get rid of it. Or if disclosure is the regime, they can hold on to their wealth. It's just disclosed. So there's no real inherent opposition between conflict of interest law and people from the business community entering politics.
Thank you. In your experience in Canada's current ethic framework, fundamentally sound, with reform best guided by evidence rather than political pressure or individual controversies? Mr. Stark.
I think it's fundamentally sound. I think that there are improvements that could be made, and I've suggested a couple of them, but I think the law is fundamentally sound. I think what the Prime Minister has done is fundamentally sound, but it could be better because the Ethics Commissioner could be more involved in the in monitoring the ethics screen, and there could be a better understanding of the matter of whether it's appropriate for the how we deal with matters where very powerful officials are affecting their own interests, not disproportionately, but as part of a broad class, but they're still affecting their interests. And so that is a question that I think that the current moment with the current Prime Minister brings to our attention. It's not often that a very powerful official is also a very wealthy person in this country. Usually, wealthy people are not necessarily in the most powerful positions in a government, or the most powerful person is not a person of great wealth. But this is an unusual moment, but because of that, it allows us to address some of these questions that we wouldn't otherwise.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary of State. We'll begin our line of questioning today with Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Secretary of State Long and your officials for your ongoing commitment to our great country. Secretary, do you prefer Secretary or Minister?
It's whatever you want. I get secretary, I get minister, and I get Wayne. So
okay,
whatever.
Secretary.
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you. You mentioned the information sharing agreement that would be authorized by Parliament. What happened to C-59?
Well, I think for us right now, it's important to look forward and to do what's necessary forward. I was sworn in as secretary on May 13th. I don't believe in looking backwards. I'm glad that you don't believe in looking backwards, Secretary, but just getting to the point, C-59 would have authorized the same thing, and it was killed by the decision by this Prime Minister, Mark Carney, to go to a spring election. So I just want to make sure that everyone here knows that your government, said it had a fix and brought that towards the previous Parliament and instead allowed it to lapse. So I don't take any of the things you've said today in those information sharing agreements, as important as they are. But I just want you to bear some responsibility. I do know that you're new here. So, Secretary, moving to the next part here, when will T4As when will this new system be implemented? Do you have a date? I was sworn in May of 2025, and we took immediate action. I recognized the driver's ink issue was a problem. I've heard from Canadians, I've heard from colleagues on both sides of the House. I guess what I would ask respectfully through you, Mr. Chair, is my hope is that we have put these measures into budget 2025. And my hope is that your party will actually support our budget, pass our budget, so we can move forward with these measures.
So I'm glad that you're hopeful. And I'm also hopeful for an answer. When will the measures when will there be actual changes at CRA that enforce the rules as they exist that they have not been enforcing?
I think the first step is to actually pass the budget so we can move these measures forward. I mean, if you want to pin me down to an actual date, I can't give you a date within like a month or two. I think the question
1 year, 2 years.
The question with respect back to you would be, is your party prepared to pass the budget? With these measures, we are committing $77.6 million in this budget over 4 years, $19.2 million.
So 4 years is what you're saying?
Each year after to up enforcement and to make sure that that moratorium is lifted. So
I think clearly where my party is on it. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to take some of my time.
Good to see my man Ken. Thank you so much. You're one of the best.
I'm here. Secretary, I ask you a very simple question. If this budget was to pass tomorrow, which will probably not be with the support of the Conservative Party, but if it did, are we talking 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or the 4 years you've been talking about? Can you not answer a simple question as to something that is directly under your responsibility?
The first step is to pass the budget. the next step is for us to take that and go through the process. I would say, soon after, if you want to pin me down to an actual month or a day, I'm not going to do that. But, first steps for us is to pass Budget 2025. I'm hoping the members on your side will actually support the budget. There's a lot of great measures in that budget. It's a generational budget. We don't hear a lot positive from your side about that.
Well,
the first step, this measure is in Budget 2025.
So the Maritime Trucking Association came here, and I asked them specifically if you had spoken to them about this. They had not. We've had every single trucking association, including the Canadian Trucking Alliance, which represents right across coast to coast to coast, and their number one ask was this. And so if you can't give us a date, sir, why would we want to support a budget if you can't even say with any sense within 4 years that you can get this done? So I think that it falls on you, sir, to be able to give us at least a date within the next 4 years. When will this collection happen? Tell to the Canadian Trucking Alliance and all the trucking firms that came in here when you are going to be doing your job.
We are committed to making this happen. Step one is to pass the budget, which clearly your party has a lot of hesitation to do, which is puzzling to me, but that's what we see in the other side. I think my record shows that, I have a business background before politics. I'm a man of action. I want results. I believe in accountability. I come from that environment, and we will endeavor to make this happen as soon as we can.
I'm really glad that someone knows how to sign the front end of a check and not just the back side. I think it's important in government to have all those perspectives in there. But I will say that if I were looking to hire a firm that can't tell me if they will take my money and not be able to give me a firm date as to when they will actually start working and getting those results, and you give them a 4-year window, I would say that was not someone I'd want to do business with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. Prochaine.
Mr. Falk, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses, both online and here in person, for your testimony. Dr. Inston, I'll start with you a little bit. You talked about our IP capabilities here in Canada and how that's all being exported. Nobody's capitalizing on that here. Can you just briefly expand on that?
I have many friends who are incredibly talented entrepreneurs who have not been able to get Canadian investors on their capitalization tables. I'll step back for a second. Venture capital as a whole is a model that was proven out in defense. This is something that's not talked about much at all, but a Harvard professor actually started the first venture capital fund after World War II to invest in World War II technologies. And the return on those investments is what really kicked off the model as a whole. Now, Canada and Europe and everywhere else was slower to adopt this type of model. And so we don't think about that history in the context of our defense spending and our investment. But we will see huge returns on that investment if we do invest in Canadian defense. But without that history, without having been part of that start at the inception of VC, we don't yet understand that. And so when my Canadian friends, I think of, Matt at Allo, Cam at Centradel, these are two Canadians that are building defense companies, and they are backed by American investors. The other thing is that we simply don't have since we don't have well-funded startups here in Canada, the new talent is going to the States. And so I actually often recommend Canadian recent grads with amazing resumes to startups in the States that are building defense technologies because we simply don't have spaces here for them.
Good, thanks. Dr. Luprick, thank you for your testimony. You, back in 2022, you were at Government Operations Committee and you made a comment there about just throwing money at something doesn't fix the problem. And you were in specific talking about defense procurement. We've seen a lot of money thrown at it in this budget. There aren't a lot of details. But this Defense Procurement Agency, known now as the Defense Investment Agency, do you see that as a solution, or is that adding one more level of bureaucracy, which is going to even make it more difficult to be successful?
Well, you probably know what Chairman Mao said about the consequence of the French Revolution when he was asked, right? The famous quote that it is too early to tell. So I think we'll need to see. I think on the one hand, the Defense Investment Agency has the potential to underwrite precisely the challenges just that Dr. Inston has laid out. In particular, we're not good, especially for small and medium enterprises, and especially in the defense sector, at underwriting that. And when we do have successful company, what happens? They get bought by the Americans. So we just become the startup pool that then ultimately, so invest tax dollars and then it gets bought up. So we need to do better. I think the Defense Investment Agency has the potential to underwrite. We've done this a little bit with the IDEAS program in national defense, but I think we need something equivalent to the US DARPA. So high risk, high return investments in defense. And this relates to sort of this, we have a very low risk tolerance in general in Canada when it comes to capital, when it comes to politics, when it comes to finance. And I think done well, the Defense Investment Agency can change that.
Really depend on the mandate and the policies established within that agency.
If the agency is simply about generating jobs in ridings across the country, as often these development agencies are, I think we might create a few jobs, but it's not going to generate this sort of transformation that we ultimately need to safeguard our sovereignty.
The other thing you indicated to the Government Operations Committee at that time is that you think that the F-35 goes a long way in meeting our needs as a deterrent. Are you still of that opinion?
So this is absolutely key, what you just pointed out, because we talk about defense and defense investments, but we don't want to invest in defense. We don't want to defend anything, right? This is the whole point, that we want to deter our adversaries. We want to change their minds, right? Because when we have to defend, that's going to be politically, economically, socially, exceptionally costly. We know this as Canadians. We were there from day one in World War I and World War II. That is the reason. We know what happens in Europe when the Europeans decide to fight their wars right down to the last Canadian. And we don't want to go there again. And this is ultimately why we're investing in deterrence with the sort of know-how and capabilities that we have in collaboration with our European allies, because we can provide a lot of the ecosystem that they are looking for.
Provides that deterrence?
The F-35 is a critical signal to the United States that we are a trusted and loyal ally when it comes to the defense of the continent. And the defense of the continent is about protecting our sovereign decision-making, and it's about protecting extended nuclear deterrence, because we can't protect extended nuclear deterrence, we'll get nuclear proliferation among allies and partners, and that can't possibly be in our interest. The F-35 is indispensable to this end.
Thank you very much, Mr.
So far.
Next, we'll go to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I want to actually carry on from where my block colleague left off in talking about some of the investigation work. Even though there have been new monies announced in the budget, there were actually monies announced in 2023 for a similar project. And on that, it was $23 million over 5 years, which equates to about $5 million per year. We received testimony earlier that there were 129 successful reclassifications. That cost $77,000 per reclassification. What would be the goal at the average cost of a reclassification from this additional money being announced?
I would say this. I think that if you want to look at just even cost versus benefits, I mean, we are going to invest $77 million over 4 years, 19.2 years after. This will produce additional revenue of $160 million. I'm very, very
just
comfortable.
On that, Mr. Long, just on that, Minister. How much additional revenue have the 2 years that have gone by from the reclassification created?
Can you repeat that question?
So you've already been at this for 2 years. You spent $10 million over the last two fiscal years reclassifying drivers. You got 129. How much money has been generated for the Treasury?
I would say that I'm very, very comfortable with what the CRA is doing. I'm very, very comfortable with the compliance actions they're taking.
I realize that, and I don't want to be rude, but I did ask a specific question, and you've made projections, so you must know what you've done so far. How much? Just a number.
I think that the fact that we're making this measure and we're taking this investment of $77 million over 4 years to ramp up compliance, to catch bad actors. We are projecting
So how much of the last 2
$160
years
million.
have you generated from the reclassification efforts where you spent $10 million?
I think that what we're doing will work. I think that we will level the playing field. I think that once and for all, we're going to actually...
Mr. Minister, how many reclassifications will you accomplish over the next 5 years? It's all good to hear about money being spent, but if it's accomplishing nothing, it's of no value.
I would reject the premise of that. I think that the fact that you would say it's accomplishing nothing, I think that the actions we're taking in Budget 2025 are huge. I think they're
how many reclassifications will the $77 million account? How many?
I think that what we're doing shows that we will produce more revenue than the expense.
Mr. Long, what's the difference between an independent contractor and an employee?
The fact that we're going to actually
Mr. Long, what's the difference between an employee and
Mr. Speaker, just very quickly, and it's not to disturb at all the questions, but I think we're at a point now where the interpreters are going to have a hard time here.
Yeah,
so
my
I wonder if we
apologies.
could ask question, answer question,
Be nice
ask
if we
question.
got an answer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lawrence, add 15 seconds on just so that you can ensure that you get responses, but I'd like to ask all members to ensure that we're giving a chance to respond just for the benefit and health of our interpreters. Thank you.
So, Minister Long, to you again. What's the difference between an independent contractor and an employee?
What's the difference between an independent contractor and an employee?
Yep.
Okay, I was a small business guy. We used both. I would pay employees. They would deduct.
How is a truck driver supposed to know whether he's an independent contractor or an employee if the Secretary of State for CRA doesn't know what it is?
Can you repeat that question?
What is the difference between an independent contractor and an employee?
Okay, an employee is paid through your payroll. Okay, there's deductions taken.
Yes.
You have.
But how are you supposed to? There's a
an independent contractor is an independent contractor. He's an independent business person. He can be incorporated. He takes his own deductions. He pays his own salary. The issue's been that T4As haven't been issued. Is that what you mean? What the difference? Like
I'm asking you. So some of these folks are bad actors, but some of them just don't know whether they are an independent contractor or an employee. So what are the distinguishing points between an independent contractor and an employee?
Well, once we solve the T4A issue that Stephen Harper put in 2011, independent contractors will get issued a T4A.
But they have
and the Harper government put a moratorium in 2011 to lift penalties.
How much time? Okay. I'll
so
take
the
the
issue
last
between
25
an
seconds,
independent
Minister, if you're...
the issue between an employee and an independent contractor couldn't be more different.
So I'll just end here. Thank you, Minister. It is clear that the Minister does not know the difference.
Wayne Long is an absolute joke. It's so funny. Like, if it wasn't real life, this shit would be so funny. This is like our day-to-day politics. Anyhow, I've got a couple of pieces that I'm going to try to throw in right before question period. We will slip into question period right on time. I know a lot of people like abandon this site to go and find question period somewhere else. We watch it here like in perfect form. Anyways, we'll find something else. Like, who's next? Wayne Long, I think there's more.
Chair, Mr. Lloyd-Brecht, you've written in the past how Canada's allowed instruments of statecraft to decay, leaving us unable to act decisively abroad. You've also been quite direct in suggesting that governments have allowed domestic political constituencies to dictate foreign and defense policy choices. So do you believe that this has shaped procurement priorities for our country, and to what detriment do you think it's had on Canadian Armed Forces operational readiness?
So I think we make policy backwards in this country. We make a whole bunch of policies and we hope that it somehow adds up to a grand strategy for the country. Other countries have a national security strategy and then they make a bunch of smaller policies to align with that national security strategy. Ours dates, as you likely know, from 2004. The world has changed significantly. So maybe we can actually establish a common target and then align what we're trying to do, because otherwise the whole is never going to be greater than the sum of the parts, and we're going to live with this fallacy of composition.
So you've also previously highlighted how development of infrastructure in our north is critical for national security. Would the establishment of a permanent base in the north strengthen sovereignty and economic presence?
I think, as you just heard from our colleagues in the north, when we talk about defense and security in the south, it means something very different to us than it does when you ask local populations in the north. And I think what we heard also in the north is that these are communities that are not very resilient. So certainly, as a defense industrial strategy, it behooves us to make sure we have resilient northern communities that can also withstand not just the kinetic threat that we are facing in this country now that the north is in play, but also the foreign interference threat and the threat to our social fabric that is very active and very real, not just in the south, but also in the north.
Thank you. Ms. Instant, do you feel that the current defense industrial strategy does enough to integrate small and medium-sized firms into the procurement supply chains?
I don't, simply because...
Do suggest, yes,
right.
to elaborate.
And again, I think this is something, I apologize for belaboring this point, but we do need to focus less on integration of small Canadian business and more on integration of sovereign Canadian IP and using that as our backbone of all that we do. I hope that that makes sense. It doesn't mean that I think that, you know, small business should be discounted, but more that fundamentally we need to focus more on building our own sovereign capabilities and strengthening our IP and defense overall.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks kind of about like Canadian domestic innovation. What lessons do you think we can learn from our allies about rapid acquisition, or to help us facilitate rapid acquisition of innovation in this space?
I would look to the Ukrainian Kurovai and Brave One marketplaces as amazing examples in Ukraine of how Ukraine shifted its procurement to allow for rapid prototyping, a changing battlefield, quick procurement. These are the sorts of things that we need to move towards rather than, you know, and I want to make something clear. Everyone takes a hard stance that our procurement is ineffective. But the truth is that war changed so quickly by the introduction of UAVs that, you know, when this last happened, it was artillery, and it happened over 300 years. FPV drones were introduced 10 years ago, and we have to change procurement very, very quickly. And so I would say that we can borrow lessons from Ukraine. I know that also, you know, U.S. Warcom, for example, is also moving their procurement models in a way that basically allows for more rapid iteration, prototyping, and procurement of the systems that we need on an as-needed basis.
Thank you very much. Mr. Poilievre, really quickly, so the political risk aversion that we were discussing a little earlier, how do you think that's negatively impacted, or do you believe it's contributed to procurement paralysis in some way?
Well, it certainly hasn't helped our defense innovation system, where if you look at the Ukrainian military, the innovation cycle is now 6 to 8 weeks. Our innovation cycle is 2 years. We're not going to win with that type of innovation cycle. So it requires, as Dr. Instant pointed out, changing the entire structure that underpins the way we think, fund, and procure innovation, and what it is that we procure. Are we procuring drones, or are we procuring the IP and the algorithms that drive the platforms?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sakan, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'll come back to you if I have any time left, Dr. Instant. Mr. Luprecht, just a quick question, and thank you very much for coming again today. It's good to see you again. You were mentioning about our defense industry problems that are not new, that are...
Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes, and then Madame Lapointe. Oh, Monsieur Sarré après pour 5 minutes. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please. 5 minutes.
Mr. McLaughlin, I'm curious about the the fines and the recovery of fines in the context of the Manitoba example that you gave. First of all, the upper limits of the fine, whether or not this is an order of the commissioner or if it's a recommendation to be voted on by the Assembly, and also what is the effect of the order? Is it does it become a provincial court order or a federal court order? So is it enforceable? And in doing so, if it does become an order of a court, does it then survive things like prorogation, for example?
A recommendation from the commissioner to the Legislative Assembly. The Legislative Assembly has a debate on it and votes on it. In this case, there was a unanimous agreement by all members that, in fact, to accept the report of the commissioner, which included these particular fines. The commissioner explained in the report his sort of how he triaged the fines. An upper fine for the premier, former premier, she received the highest fine on that, and then less for the somewhat less for the other individuals. The sanction beyond the public sanction and public embarrassment, if you will, litigating this in public for these individuals was that the government could withhold or garnish, if you will, any outstanding wages, pensions, and other kinds of payments that they were entitled to. So if they did not pay the fine, then the government could take steps to basically say, okay, we'll withhold a portion of your pension or whatever we owe you for other things until it is paid off.
Do you think that it would enhance were these powers given to the federal commissioner? Do you think it would enhance the separation or enhance his or her independence? Should they have the power to impose the fine without simply recommending it to the House and then thereby politicizing the matter further?
I think it's a good question. I think a cleaner version would be for the commissioner, if you're going to have a truly independent commissioner with that kind of authority, then to give the commissioner that, the appropriate authority through legislation, et cetera. That takes it out of the political cockpit. $3 billion deficit. Debate is in terms of a vote in the House of Commons and with all the attendant, drama, if you will, or that goes with it. It makes it very clear that it is not, in fact, a political issue. It is, in fact, a conflict of interest issue. And here is the particular fine and sanction, and then it has the appropriate force. I don't know how you write that in law, but I think that would be a cleaner way of doing it.
If you could, do you believe that fines of the magnitude of $50,000 for violation of the Conflict of Interest Act for serious violations of it are an appropriate remedy for breaches?
Sir, I would, whether it's 50 or 100 or something, I mean, a higher fine definitely carries more weight. It says to the public, this is important. This is, if there's a mistake here, people say, well, wait a minute, $50,000, that's a lot of money, right? So it must be important. So certainly a higher fine. You could scale it in some way depending on the extent of the offense. If there was money involved, I'm not certain again how you might do that, but I would certainly push it to an upper limit as much as you're allowed to in law.
Thank you, Professor Stark. Just quickly, would you agree with that type of regime having fines? $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the office that's held and the offense or violation or contravention of the act?
I don't know what I agree with David that it's serious to be in a conflict of interest, but again, it's not necessarily corruption. So I think that the best thing to do in a conflict of interest situation is for the official to have a chance to remedy it and to apologize and acknowledge it. But in cases where that doesn't happen, yes, I think there should be fines and they should be significant. What the amount should be, I don't know.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
All right, gang, we're going to cross over right now into question period. My name is Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. I'm not crazy. The politics are. Like, it's nuts. We have a great chat room here. Like, I love it's my favorite part of doing the live show, hands down. So we're going to cross over here to question period. I think it's about ready to go. So we're going to get right into that. So here, the Liberals are wrapping up.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, every dollar this Prime Minister spends comes directly out of Canadians' pockets. This Liberal government's 10th budget delivers the largest deficit outside of the COVID years at $78 billion. It will add more fuel to the inflation fire, and Canadians will continue to struggle to afford groceries. Poverty and food insecurity have risen nearly 40% in just 2 years, yet the Liberals keep gaslighting Canadians by insisting their hidden taxes on food and fuel are imaginary. Shameful. Conservatives have put forward real solutions to make life affordable, cutting the industrial carbon tax, the food packaging tax, and the fuel standards tax. But the Liberals instead chose to give tax breaks to elites purchasing private jets and yachts. My neighbors in Oshawa are clear. They do not want a costly election. They wanted an affordable budget. Conservatives want a hopeful future. For young people, we want homes, jobs, and hope. Well said. For our seniors, we want affordability. We want to bring back the promise.
The honourable member for Calgary Confederation.
Mr. Speaker, forestry is core to our Canadian identity and the backbone of communities across Canada. This vital sector provides good jobs, drives local economies, and keeps our towns and cities going. Recently, during Forestry Week, the Forest Products Association of Canada held its annual National Forestry Policy Conference here in Ottawa. This conference brought together leaders in forestry from across Canada. It advocated and brought forward ideas for the forestry sector and the over 200,000 jobs it sustains. I want to extend a special thanks to the workers who power this industry and all those who attended, because forestry supports our Canadian way of life. And as Canadians, we need to support the forestry sector. Not just during these trying times of trade disputes, but always. Let's work together across party lines to defend and grow this vibrant sector, because when forestry is strong, Canada is strong.
Yes. Honourable member for Columbia, Kootenay, Southern Rockies.
The Supreme Court's decision in this case is devastating. 2 men were found with hundreds of images and videos of children.
Yeah, it's far too loud in the House for statements. As we know, these statements mean a lot to members and to their communities. So if the member could start from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Supreme Court's decision in this case is devastating. 2 men were found with hundreds of images and videos of children, some as young as 3 years old. One had 317 images, mostly of little girls between 3 and 6. The other had hundreds of videos of children between 5 and 10. These are not victimless crimes. Every image is a real child, hurt, humiliated, and forever changed. These children deserve justice, not excuses. Yet the court chose to focus on theory instead of horrifying facts in front of them. Canadians know justice means protecting the most vulnerable among us. A future Conservative government will use the notwithstanding clause to overturn this ruling. We will restore mandatory minimum sentences for child sexual abuse material and ensure predators face the full weight of the law.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-La Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the holiday season approaches, our communities are getting ready to help those who need it most. Food drives, which are run by volunteers with big hearts, remind us of the importance of solidarity and sharing. Every donation, large or small, helps ensure food security for disadvantaged families and offers a little comfort to those for whom this time of year can be hard. In Argenteuil-La Petite Nation, I would like to commend the incredible work of community organizations, food banks, parishes, and committed people who give of themselves so selflessly to ensure that no one is left behind. In this season of giving and of food drives, I invite all Canadians to give from the heart so that every family can celebrate Christmas with dignity and hope.
The honourable member for Cambridge.
Mr. Speaker, this budget is a booby-trap blueprint that burdens the next generation with back-breaking bills and broken balances. While the Prime Minister boasts and brags, young Canadians are being buried beneath a $78 billion deficit bombshell. That's not just a blunder, it's a brazen breach of trust. He blurted he'd bring down spending, but instead his first budget ballooned by $90 billion, bankrupting blue-collar breadwinners and blaming everyone but himself. Now interest payments on the national debt have ballooned beyond what we budget for healthcare transfers. And every household is being billed an extra $5,400 in bloated inflationary spending. A brutal blow to families already barely getting by. Basic needs are being bumped for banker buddies and bloated bureaucracy. And what's the bottom line for our youth? Bleak futures and broken dreams. Behind the buzzwords and back-patting, this budget is a bad bargain for Canadians. It's time to bring back balance, build responsibly, and break free from this cycle of borrowing, bluffing, and betrayal.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this budget is all about building Canada strong. Hear, hear. It cares about people. That's why we see the dental program. That's why we see childcare. That's why we have a national school program that's going to be there for over 400,000 children. It is about building a community, Mr. Speaker. That's right. It's investing in Canada. Yep. Mr. Speaker, think of our hospitals. Think of our streets. Think of our bridges. Think about our communities. That's what this budget's all about. That's right. Investing in Canadians. That's right. The Conservatives, they don't believe in Canada, Mr. That's Speaker. Right. But this Prime Minister, this government, we believe in Canada.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
6 months ago, the Prime Minister promised Canadians that he'd get the deficit under control, that he'd lower our debt and lower inflation. Instead, he's blown an $80 billion hole in the budget. The debt is climbing, inflation is climbing, and he's added $90 billion in new spending. That's over $5,000 for every family. Every dollar that the Prime Minister spends costs Canadians in higher taxes, higher inflation, and more expensive debt. With this budget, Canadians are paying champagne prices for tap water results. So why is he asking them to pay more?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll refer to the previous comments of the honourable member from Winnipeg North. This budget is about building this great country. And what this budget shows is that with the $1 trillion of investment that we are going to catalyze, we are going to put more than $3,000 in the pocket of every Canadian by the end of this decade.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
They're not investing in the next generation. They're borrowing from it. This Prime Minister is on track to be the most expensive in Canada's history. The only ones cashing in on it are bankers. Interest payments on the national debt will cost Canadians $55 billion this year. That's more than this government spends on healthcare and more than it collects in GST. Every dollar that Canadians pay in GST doesn't go to doctors or nurses or hospitals. It goes to bankers. So why is the Prime Minister so determined to make sure that bankers get better care than patients?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this budget preserves the health transfer to the provinces, over $29 billion. This budget puts $5 billion into health infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, this budget...
Is this guy clowning you or just me? Like, oh my God, Mark Carney is hard to tolerate, guys. He's a lot.
It has the lowest net debt to GDP in the G7. It has the lowest deficit projected. And the cost of interest borrowing is lower than when the Conservatives were in government.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable, Lotbinière. The cost of this Liberal budget is going to drive up the price of food, of housing, and everything else that Canadians need. The Prime Minister claims that Canada is in a strong fiscal position. Then why are families having such a hard time making ends meet? Home ownership is virtually impossible for young people. Why are 2.2 million Canadians lining up at food banks every month? That's not solid. That's not strong. The Liberal leader has chosen to enrich his friends with an $80 billion deficit. Why is the Prime Minister breaking his promise to spend less by adding fuel to the fire of inflation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, 75% of the new measures in this budget this year are for protecting Canada's sovereignty and for affordability for all Canadians. First point. Second point, this is a budget that invests in Canada. It's a budget that shows confidence in Canada, a budget that's going to put more than $3,000 in the pockets of Canadians. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget that is going to go down in history. This Prime Minister is going to go down in history as the most costly government leader in the history of Canada. I'd like to remind him of something important. Every dollar that he spends comes directly out of the pocket of a Canadian who's worked hard to earn it. He promised to spend less, and yet his deficit's going to be almost $80 billion. And in the Journal de Montréal, we read this morning that the federal government is disconnected from real life. What parallel universe is he living in, the Prime Minister? He doesn't understand that he's fueling inflation with his spending, and it's making life harder for every Canadian. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's not the most costly budget, it's the most ambitious budget. The most ambitious budget for Canada. It's ambitious when it comes to building housing for Quebecers and Canadians. Housing across the country. For clean energy, for the future of Canada. This is a budget for the future.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East. This Prime Minister's $80 billion deficit will cost each Canadian household $5,400 while avoiding the tax pain he imposes on Canadians. Coming from the guy that set up a $30 billion offshore tax havens for Brookfield when he was chair. He continues to dodge questions on how much money he personally has stashed away offshore while avoiding the taxes he imposes on Canadians. Will he stand up today and tell Canadians how much money he has in offshore tax havens? Just the number.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
She's the one always cheering.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this budget tightens tax fairness. Mr. Speaker, this budget cuts taxes for 22 million. This budget cuts taxes on new homes for young Canadians starting out. This budget cuts the carbon tax. This budget grows this great country. Come with us and support it.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East. He's avoiding the question like he helped Brookfield avoid taxes. When he imposes higher taxes on Canadians, they have a right to know if this Prime Minister still has money in offshore tax havens. I'll give him one more chance. Will he stand up on his own 2 feet and tell Canadians exactly how much money he has stashed away in offshore tax havens? Just the number.
No chance.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm proud of my record in the private sector.
He's
but
an
I'm
asshole.
deeply honored to serve Canadians. And we're serving Canadians by building this great country. By investing in homes, by investing in energy, by investing in ports, by investing in our future. We are going to grow this country like not seen before. There is a chance for everyone in this House to stand up and support it.
Give me a break.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, for a Quebecer, standing up means standing up for the independence of Quebec. We gave this government a chance. You know, they're in a recruitment campaign, and we said, could you eliminate discrimination when it comes to old age security that's paid to people who are age 65 to 74? They get 10% less than those who are 75 and over. All they had to do was say, yes, that's a principle of justice that we can follow. Does he recognize that he simply refused to help retirees? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, there is more than $80 billion in transfers for seniors across Canada. $80 billion. Yes, older seniors do get more, and that is justice. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, he didn't read his notes. He didn't read his budget. A second chance. We suggested to the government, it's one thing to build homes, but young people have to be able to afford to buy them. And we said to the government there should be a privileged access system to credit for young families who are buying a first home so that somebody can buy those first homes. The government refused that. Will the Prime Minister confirm that he refused to help young people buy a first home with access to credit? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, yes, there is an advantage for young people who are buying their first home, and that is justice. And that's on top of the big investments that we're making in housing. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The priority of Quebecers and Canadians is also health care. We offered to work with the government to increase health care transfers so that they could follow the increases in spending across the health care system in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. The government said no. Quebec and Canadian taxpayers are going to be paying more and more in taxes, or they're going to have less money to do other things. Will the government confirm that it refuses to increase the health transfers so that they can follow the increased costs on the systems? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have good news. Good news for Quebec. $12 billion in transfers for health care and $5 billion for infrastructure, for health care infrastructure in this budget. And there's $4 billion for Hydro-Quebec. There's the port in Contrecoeur. There's the second dock in Saguenay. And $500 million for culture, particularly for cultural institutions in Quebec.
The Honourable Member for Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand that the more he spends, the more things cost for regular Canadians. Liberals had a chance to lower food costs by scrapping the industrial carbon tax, but they chose to increase food costs by increasing the industrial carbon tax. That drives up costs like fertilizer and farm equipment. So why is the Prime Minister increasing the industrial carbon tax and making food more expensive for Canadians?
Yeah, way to go, man.
Secretary of State for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, if Conservatives vote against Budget 2025, they vote against old age security. They vote against guaranteed income supplements. They vote against the New Horizons for Seniors program.
Wow.
They vote against anti-fraud measures that will protect seniors from financial crime. They vote against a tax credit for personal support workers who care for seniors. And they vote against dental care that over 2 million seniors rely on. Canadians want to know, who are these Conservatives fighting for? Because it certainly isn't seniors.
The Honourable Member for Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, let me spell this out for the Liberals. No farms, no food. The food professor warns that we're the only country in the G7 that's seen 4 consecutive months of rising food inflation. The industrial carbon tax is driving up wholesale food prices full stop. The Liberals have introduced another of the most costly and largest deficit budgets in Canadian history. So when Canadians are already struggling to put food on the table, why is the Prime Minister so intent on increasing the industrial carbon tax to make food more expensive?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me quote Sylvain Charlebois. Ottawa has quietly set the stage for some indirect relief, not through grocery subsidies and consumers facing policies, but through infrastructure, trade, administrative reforms that could make the food system work a little more efficiency. Mr. Speaker, our farmers have been asking for some of this stuff for a long time. Stand up and give it to them.
Again, through the chair, please. The honourable member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history, and every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians. The more they spend, the more things cost. Unfortunately, this Liberal Prime Minister didn't learn anything from the mistakes of the last Liberal Prime Minister. They had a chance in their budget to lower food costs for Canadians by scrapping the industrial carbon tax. Yet they chose to make food more expensive by increasing the industrial carbon tax, driving up the cost of fertilizer and farm equipment. So why is the Prime Minister increasing the industrial carbon tax and making food more expensive for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Management and Community Resilience.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2025 delivers a stronger Alberta economy by backing workers and industries and innovators. It supports jobs and Alberta's economic edge. Alberta Chamber of Commerce CEO Doug Griffiths said it's a clear commitment to driving economic growth and job creation. Conservatives can't stand up for Alberta if they won't listen to our business community.
Member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal industrial carbon tax drives up the price of food. Since this Prime Minister took office, strawberries are up 25%, beef is up 25%, coffee is up 20%. The food professor Sylvain Charlebois told us that the widening gap between Canadian and American food prices was driven by one single factor, the carbon tax. He predicts bad news for 2026 and states that we're the only country in the G7 which has seen 4 consecutive months of a food inflation rate increase. Why is the Prime Minister insisting on making food more expensive for Canadians by raising
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, I am so proud to stand today and support a budget that is growing this country, but is also paying attention to rural communities. And I can tell you, in Newfoundland and Labrador, investment in roads, bridges, hospitals, houses, communities, it matters. And I'm asking my Conservative Newfoundland and Labrador colleagues, are they going to vote for the things that matter to our province?
The Honourable Member for Chatham-Kent, Leamington.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. Every dollar this Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians, and the more they spend, the more things cost. The Liberals just had a chance to lower food prices by scrapping the industrial carbon tax. But instead they chose to make food more expensive by hiking the industrial carbon tax that makes food, fuel, and farm equipment more expensive. These costs are passed directly on to Canadians at the grocery store. Why is the Prime Minister not scrapping the carbon tax and making food less expensive?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Sport.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives are focused on imaginary taxes, we're building Canada strong, Mr. Speaker. And Budget 2025 invests $51 billion into the Build Community Strong Fund, Mr. Speaker. That's good news for families in southwestern Ontario, like my colleague from that area. This includes money for the Newton Athletic Park in Surrey. It includes the Royal Athletic Park in Victoria. It includes the Hamilton Downtown YMCA. It includes the Hamilton Sportif de Montreal. Mr. Speaker, we're going to build Canada strong, and that includes sports facilities for our communities. I hope that Member of Parliament will vote for our budget.
The Honourable Member for Chatham-Kent, Leamington.
Mr. Speaker, the following is not imaginary. The food professor, go ahead, Mock, said, and I quote, "The gap between wholesale prices in Canada versus the U.S. wholesale prices has widened, and one factor driving that is the industrial carbon tax. Canada is the only G7 country that's had 4 consecutive months of food inflation increases. Farmers, manufacturers, builders across the country are paying more for fertilizers, steel, and concrete, costs that end up on Canadians' plates. While other G7 countries are lowering costs, this Prime Minister is ignoring the experts, increasing the carbon tax, and making food more expensive. Why?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Very often quoted Sylvain Charlebois had exactly this to say about Budget 2025. Instead, he said our investments in logistics and corridors and trade will bring prices down for food.
Calgary Signal Hill.
Mr. Speaker, we now know that this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians. The more the Liberals spend, the more life costs. Every economist knows this. The Prime Minister could have scrapped the inflationary industrial carbon tax. Instead, he chose to increase the tax and increase costs for all Canadians. My question to the Prime Minister is simple. Why is he increasing the industrial carbon tax and making our food more expensive?
Why? The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, here's what our government is doing. Last week, we worked with 9 different countries to announce 25 different transactions to bring $6.4 billion to 6 new mining and processing facilities all across this country. Voting for this budget will bring a lot more of that, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, the budget, it's the worst of both worlds. It's a Liberal deficit with Conservative ideas. Nothing for healthcare, nothing for seniors, environmental cuts. It's Stephen Harper all over again. And it's not me who said it, it's the government House Leader yesterday who said it, and I quote, "This is a budget that Conservative voters could love." The Liberals aren't even hiding it, except that Quebecers, they didn't vote Conservative. They didn't vote for cuts to health care. They didn't vote for our seniors to be abandoned. They didn't vote to end the fight against climate change. Why are the Liberals not meeting the demands of Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers voted for 44 Liberal members on this side of the House. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you might remember who was president of LADISC in 2003. He was, it was the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and he was in favour of investments in Canadian culture at the time. And now the member is going to tell his members to vote against cultural investments for TV and music in Quebec for our artists. He's saying, no, we don't want those investments in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, this is the budget of climate capitulation. Cuts of 15% to the Department of the Environment. Ending the cap on emissions in the oil and gas sector, tax credits for the oil and gas sector, and more. This morning, the Environment Commissioner was clear. He said that Canada would not be able to meet its greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets for 2030, and we're going even further back by ending carbon pricing. There's more money for the oil sector, less money for the environment. We're heading straight into the wall. Why are the Liberals keeping their foot on the gas? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I say it every day, our government will continue to fight climate change, and if you look at the budget, you'll see the investments. There will continue to be industrial carbon pricing. We are going to reduce methane emissions, but not only that, if you look throughout the budget, you'll see that we are fighting climate change in every department of the government. We're going to do the work. We will build a strong Canada.
The Honourable Member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
The Toronto home building industry has released a scathing report on this government's budget, warning of 100,000 job losses in the sector, despite the Prime Minister promising 500,000 homes a year during the election. The government continues to refuse to implement our policy of cutting the GST on all new homes under $1.3 million. Now, housing starts have plummeted and developers are laying off their trained staff because the cost of government is just too high. Why won't the government listen to the experts and cut the GST on all new homes under $1.3 million so builders can get back to work and building the homes that Canadians so desperately need?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, here's the reality check. The Conservative Party of Canada is voting against the largest investment in infrastructure in Canadian history, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of jobs, apprenticeship opportunities, opportunities for our youth, opportunities to train the next generation, Mr. Speaker. Roads, bridges, community centers, hospitals, you name it. Major projects in the national interest, homes, Mr. Speaker. None of this happens if the Conservatives vote against the budget. I hope they'll reconsider.
The honourable member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if spending money could solve the housing crisis, we'd have a surplus right now. And this from a government who named a housing minister who made housing taxes 141% more expensive in Vancouver and also increased the prices of homes by 149%. We're in a housing crisis now, and it's clear this guy doesn't get it. The experts are warning of 100,000 job losses in the sector. So if the government won't listen to us and what we're saying about cutting the GST on homes under $1.3 million, why won't they listen to the experts?
Here. The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the real question is, will the Conservatives support the most aggressive housing budget in Canadian history? Will you? Come on. Your new government is proposing the biggest investment in our history in affordable housing, putting Canadians to work, building the affordable housing that we need. We're seeing unprecedented levels of housing starts. We're seeing progress in housing right now, and we're doubling up on that. We're going to build. We expect your support on the budget to do more.
Again, state members, through the chair, I don't have an opinion on this. The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
On Tuesday, Canadians saw the truth about this Liberal government's disastrous housing plan. They promised to build 500,000 homes a year, but turned into a plan to kill 100,000 jobs. Toronto's Build Association says the budget is particularly troubling. Not an actionable plan to reduce housing fees with any urgency. They promised to cut development charges by 50%, but surprise, another broken Liberal promise. Housing sales have collapsed, down 82% in the GTA. Will the Prime Minister finally admit he is not building homes, he's only building a long list of broken promises?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Mr. Speaker, this is a budget that will invest in Canada, invest in young Canadians, invest in Canadian families from coast to coast to coast. We are supporting youth by giving opportunities to help them build skilled trades and access high-paying careers and jobs across the projects, building homes, building out major national projects. We are investing in training and supports for 20,000 youth who are facing employment barriers, 24,000 additional Canada Summer Jobs opportunities, co-ops, internships, and apprenticeships across the country. We hope that members opposite will support young people and their opportunities for jobs.
Good job. The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
We've heard this before. The recycled ideas in Canada's housing industry continues to fall. Housing sales are down 82% in the GTA. Toronto's Build Association warns that this budget is built on backward-looking data that provides false assurances. In simple terms, builders can build, sellers can sell, and buyers cannot buy. And not only that, this budget will cost 100,000 jobs and commit us to a future with fewer homes and fewer opportunities. Will the Prime Minister come to his senses and finally address the cost of development charges so we can unleash our housing construction?
Yes, the Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality, Tourism and Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, when Conservatives talk about affordability, what they really mean are cuts. Cuts to the programs that Canadians vitally rely on. Parents and families know that they can trust our government has their backs. We've strengthened the Canada Child Benefit, providing families nearly $8,000 for children under 6 and $6,570 for children aged 6 to 17. Through the budget, we are making permanent the National School Food Program, which will give parents peace of mind so that they can send their kids to school with a full meal. Mr. Speaker, well, what she was really referring to is the only thing recycled on that side of the House are their slogans, Mr.
The honourable member for Brampton West.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends costs out of Canadians' pockets. The more he spends, the more everything costs. He promised to lower the debt to GDP ratio, he raised it. He promised to spend less, but he has blown $90 billion, costing every family $5,400. Now Liberal spends more on interest payments than health care, spending $55.6 billion to service debt while Canadians struggle to pay for grocery and housing. When will the Prime Minister stop mortgaging Canadians' future and deliver an affordable budget for Canadians?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, that member has risen in this House many times to address public safety concerns, and I know that his constituents in Brampton have those concerns because they're my constituents too, Mr. Speaker. In this budget, there are historic investments, $1.7 billion to the RCMP. Oh. We're deploying 1,000 new officers and 1,000 new CBSA agents, Mr. Speaker. But the Conservatives have said they're not going to support it. But it doesn't surprise me since their leader thinks the RCMP is despicable.
The Honourable Member for Brome, Missisquoi. Mr. Speaker, as a former mayor dealing with infrastructure problems and housing, and it doesn't just affect urban ridings, but also rural ridings like mine, Brome, Missisquoi. The government has committed to investing in housing and infrastructure as part of the Canada Strong budget, a once-in-a-generation investment. Can the Minister of Finance tell the House what steps are being taken to build more boldly and quickly than ever before in ridings like mine? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have all kinds of good news for Canadians, but we only have 30 seconds to explain to Canadians, yes, with Build Canada Homes, we're going to build more affordable homes. And together with the communities, we're going to invest in water and other municipal infrastructure. And yes, we have a fund for health infrastructure, like Quebec asked for. All members in this House should stand up in favour of this generational budget to help the next generation to build Canada strong. We believe in Canada, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister introduced his first budget, much more costly than Canadians anticipated. A $78 billion deficit is a high hurdle to get over, but the fiscal year is not final yet, and this government has never set a spending target they haven't blown past. Don't worry, there's more debt ahead, and the next 5 years of forecast deficits have doubled under this Prime Minister. And I'll correct the Prime Minister, because 10 years ago under the last Conservative administration, debt servicing was $28 billion and going down. It's $55 billion going up now. So why is the Prime Minister choosing to ignore the inflation he's causing and driving up costs for Canadians?
Here, here. The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, this is the generational budget that will increase Canada's economic competitiveness and prosperity. That's good news for our small, medium and large businesses. The President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Candice Lang, says the government has heard businesses call to focus on the economy and has made some tough choices to attract investment. Mr. Speaker, this is about building the strongest economy in the G7. I hope we can count on our colleagues' support.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Well, that wasn't an answer to the question. I think it was a lot of fantasy at the end of the day. But this government once again has revised its so-called fiscal anchors. That's another target they keep missing. No problem, just change the definition. This year's anchors are so weak, they're practically meaningless. When you change definition to fit your narrative, you undermine trust and accountability. Canadians deserve stability, not a government that moves the goalposts whenever it suits them. Mr. Speaker, Canada's fiscal position is adrift. Will the minister admit this budget has no fiscal responsibility and his so-called anchors are a political spin? Thank you.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, this government recently announced a 3-year extension of Operation Reassurance, Canada's largest overseas military mission with over 2,000 CAF members stationed in Latvia. Is this member seriously suggesting that Canada should not pass a budget which allows us to give the strongest expression of our commitment to NATO as Canadians reinforce NATO's eastern flank by contributing to collective defence and cooperative security in the region? Mr. Speaker, Canada is leading a 14-nation multinational brigade there. I would suggest the members opposite join us, support our Canadian Armed Forces.
The Honourable Member for
McGuinty is a full-blown retard. Like, he's ridiculous. I can't believe he's still in government. Who would vote for that loser? Like, McGuinty, National Defense Minister, is a troll. He's just a punk. It's so frustrating to watch this shit.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians. The more he spends, the more things cost. The Prime Minister promised Canadians that he'd keep the deficit less than $62 billion. Instead, it's $78 billion. He told Canadians he'd get rid of the consumer carbon tax, but instead, the industrial carbon tax is set to rise and make food even more expensive by driving up the cost of fuel, fertilizer, and farm equipment. Why is the Prime Minister increasing the industrial carbon tax, and why does he want to make food more expensive?
Oh, give it to him, come on! The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, a working-class Canadian voting Conservative would be like a chicken voting for Colonel Sanders. My goodness, Mr. Speaker, when I took to people who live in rural Nova Scotia, they want simple things. They want good jobs, better health care, lower taxes, and this budget delivers all three. You don't have to take my word for it. Listen to a statement from the provincial progressive Conservative government in Nova Scotia, who congratulated the Prime Minister on his budget based on more money for health care infrastructure, for housing and development, and for tax incentives that are going to create good jobs for the people who live in my communities. Conservatives from different parts of the country know this is a good idea. The only Conservatives who seem to disagree are the ones who sit on the other side of this House.
L'honorable député de Côte-du-Sud.
The honourable member for Côte-du-Sud, Rivière-du-Loup, Témiscouata. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have tabled the costliest budget with the biggest deficit in Canadian history outside of the pandemic. It will drive up the price of food, housing, and everything Canadians need. And it's our families who are paying the price at the grocery store for the industrial carbon tax that this government has hiked. A few weeks ago, I asked for an answer on behalf of a constituent in La Pocatière who was forced to choose between housing and feeding her family. We didn't get any answer. Why is this Prime Minister hiking the industrial carbon tax and making food more expensive for my constituent and all Canadians? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit surprised by my colleague's reaction. In this budget, there is help for Lévis and La Pocatière. In this budget, and I met with people from Napierville. In my riding, we have one of the biggest borders in Quebec. $1.7 billion to strengthen border security. That's what this budget has for all of us, and I'm sure that other constituents are supportive of this too. The Honourable Member for Côte-du-Sud. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals had a chance to ease the burden on Canadians, but since this Prime Minister took office, prices have skyrocketed. Strawberries up 25%, beef 25%, and coffee 20%. It's unbelievable. The industrial carbon tax is adding to the price gap with the U.S. and is likely to keep food inflation high. This is according to Professor Sylvain Charlebois. He said it'll stay that way for years to come. Mr. Speaker, once again, why is this government hiking this tax and making food even more expensive for our families? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, we're going to build Canada strong with generational investments in infrastructure. Budget 2025 holds $5 billion for an infrastructure and health fund, which will contribute to building new hospitals.
This stupid Haitian woman, who is an illegal immigrant to our country. Now she's our health minister. She's a total voodoo woman. Thinks that she has the best plot because the WEF put a bunch of money in her pocket. This woman is a skank hoe. She's trash. She's stupid. Also, she has a low IQ. So, you can see that by the way she needs to read from the paper. Her name is Mary Marjorie, and she is trash.
ERs, care centers, and medicine faculties, to name a few. This is what the provinces and territories asked us to do, and that's what we've done. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. Conservatives are for tax cuts to leave more money in the pockets of Canadians. Do you know where the Liberals have chosen to cut taxes? Try to stay in your seat here. Private aircraft and luxury yachts. This is no joke. It's for Liberal cronies. That's where they're cutting taxes. I would invite people to speak to single parents, to go to grocery stores and speak to seniors, whether they want tax cuts or lower food prices.
Minister of Indigenous Services.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'invite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd invite my
That
colleague on the
stupid
other side of
She's
the
a
House
flake,
to talk
a
to all of
snowflake, a
his
stupid
constituents,
dumb
because in
bitch.
this budget we decided to protect the position of First Nations. It's important also that we included infrastructure investments for water and housing. It's also important to invite the opposition to work with us to protect First Nations. And I know that there are some in his
Flat
riding.
boobs,
Thank you.
gross stomach. Everything
Member
about
for
that
Richmond
woman
North
is
Tabasco.
repulsive.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, the federal government is disconnected from reality. She talks about First Nations, but I was talking about luxury jets and yachts. So the answer had nothing to do with my question. There are people suffering and struggling. Nothing for our seniors. Who decided to cut taxes on luxury yachts and jets? The honourable member. Well, it's tiring when a member from Quebec stands up and suggests that aerospace is not important in Quebec. That industry is very important. Bombardier announced 600 new jobs in Quebec yesterday. My colleague, as a former colleague of François Legault in Quebec City, should be calling François Legault and telling him what he thinks about this news.
The honourable member for Haldimand and Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, in a democracy, everything can be debated, but some moral lines should never be blurred. Protecting vulnerable children must remain one of them. The Supreme Court recently struck down a one-year mandatory prison sentence for two men who possess hundreds of sexual images of children, some as young as 3 years old. These are real victims of abuse and trauma. Why is this government more focused on protecting the charter rights of pedophiles rather than defending the dignity of children?
Yeah, way to go.
Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, plain and simple, child abusers should face the toughest penalties under Canadian law. Mr. Speaker, we are bringing forward legislation that is going to protect children. I hope the Conservatives can support it because their past record is that they haven't supported the online harms legislation. They haven't supported lawful access tools for law enforcement so we can catch child predators. They put politics before the safety of our children, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Haldimand, Norfolk.
The sexual exploitation of children is one of the clearest and most horrific crimes imaginable. Recently, the Supreme Court struck down the one-year mandatory sentence for possessing child sexual abuse material. Yet this government refuses to use Section 33 of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause, to restore the minimal penalties for pedophiles. Why is this government choosing to protect the charter rights of predators over the safety and the innocence of our children?
The Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, like I've said before, child predators are the worst criminals in our country, and they should face the toughest sentences. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly why we're bringing forward new legislation so that we can toughen sentences and make sure child predators stay behind bars, Mr. Speaker. But I would like the Conservatives to promise that they will support that piece of legislation and they will support C-19 that is currently before this House, because they have not supported us in the past when it comes to helping children and to protecting children. So please put your politics aside and support the children of this country.
The Again, through the chair, please. The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2025 is a
She's
generational
a beast.
investment in our economy, in our industries, and in Canadians. Canadians are paying lower prices for cellular services, a 40% decline in prices over 5 years. But these bills still eat into the pockets of Canadians. Budget 2025 has proposed measures to lower costs for Canadians and to improve competition. At a time when Canadians are concerned with rising costs and keeping their monthly bills affordable, can the Minister of Industry tell us how the government is working to lower cell phone bills?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
I thank my colleague from Cumberland Colchester for her important question. She and I are laser focused, and this government laser focused on making sure that we bring down costs in the telecom sector, because we took the right decision this summer to uphold the decision of the CRTC to increase competition in the telecommunications sector. We said also that we would be hawkish on competition, so we will do more in this budget to increase competition and make sure that we reform our telecommunications sector. Thank you so much.
The honourable member for Edmonton Northwest.
The Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID. The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else Canadians buy. The young families, seniors, and veterans in Edmonton Northwest are having to make hard choices as the snow falls. It's costing more to heat their homes and feed their families. But every day in this House, the Liberals say families are just imagining higher living expenses by their taxes and increased spending. So why is the Prime Minister breaking his promise to spend less and pouring more inflationary fuel on the fire?
Good question.
The Honourable Secretary of State for Defence Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2025 will enable Canada to step up to meet the moment, to include $82 billion for defence and security. And here's a fun fact, Mr. Speaker. Stephen Harper's 2009 budget, adjusted for inflation, is actually the biggest deficit budget in Canadian history, with little to show for it. We'll take no lessons from the Conservatives.
The honourable member for Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Adjusted for the inflation that they caused. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' new budget is generationally expensive. It is historically expensive. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends will come out of Canadians' pockets. The more they spend, the more things will cost. Either through taxes or inflation in the future, the cost will come. $80 billion is $2,000 for each man, woman, and child in our country. That's $2,000 for my 3-year-old daughter and $2,000 for my 1-year-old son. Why should they have to pay this generational debt the Prime Minister is saddling us with? Why is the Prime Minister breaking his promise to spend less?
Honourable Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
This budget invests in lowering the cost of living and creating jobs, including $2 billion for the Critical Minerals Sovereign Fund. Critical minerals are in our phones, computers, solar panels, medical equipment, and more. Canada is rich in minerals, with projects in ridings held by Conservatives, Bloc Québécois, NDP, and Liberals, including in my home, the Northwest Territories. These investments mean good jobs, including in Ontario, stronger communities, and keeps Canada a leader in technology, defence, and healthcare. The Mining Association of Canada has applauded the budget, and I hope members opposite will too.
The honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Mr. Speaker, this government is the most expensive in Canadian history. Every dollar this Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians. The more they spend, the more things cost. Nearly $80 billion in deficit spending. That means $450 a month coming right out of Canadians' pockets. This will make it even harder for Canadians to buy groceries and pay their bills. Instead, we get a bloated bureaucracy and high-priced consultants. Why does this Prime Minister believe he can spend hardworking Canadians' money better than they can?
The Honourable Minister for Northern and Arctic Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we're focused on securing our sovereignty in the North and the Arctic with a $1 billion infrastructure fund for airports, seaports, all-season roads in North and in northern Manitoba. We're focused on a $2.3 billion clean water for Indigenous communities. They're voting against an Inuit Nunangat University to build skills and hopes for Northern youth. We are focused on building, protecting, and empowering Canadians. They need to get on board.
The honourable member for Honoré Mercier.
Mr. Speaker, residents in my riding have expressed concern about the cost of living. Budget 2025 is full of great initiatives that will empower them and Canadians across the country.
Shut him down.
Clearly, there are many in this House who would like to hear the member from the top.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues are very excited to hear me today. Budget 2025 is full of great initiatives that will empower them and Canadians across the country to get ahead financially. Increasing competition is one way to achieve affordability. And in Budget 2025, there are several pro-affordability measures related to making the financial sector more competitive. Can the Secretary of State for the CRA and financial institutions inform this House about how the government is making life more affordable for Canadians by reforming the financial sector?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for that important question. In our generational budget, Canada's new government is making life more affordable for Canadians by making our financial system more competitive and innovative. Among other things, we are providing Canadians with more financial options by helping credit unions and smaller banks grow and compete, advancing open banking, which will make it easier for Canadians to find lower fee checking accounts, cheaper loans, and higher interest savings. On this side of the House, we're laser focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wayne Long is a little loser freak.
The Prime Minister told
It's a
Canadians
waste
that
of
they need to sacrifice
blood
more
and
to
guts.
pay for the Liberals' inflationary deficit. But the Liberals sure aren't sacrificing much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, an Ottawa gossip rag feted the Liberals for attending a lavish deficit cocktail party hosted by rich Ottawa insiders, lobbyists, and media firms who were thrilled with the billions of tax dollars for their wealthy clients and owners. Will the Liberals apologize for popping champagne corks with rich lobbyists to celebrate a massive inflationary deficit while Canadians can't even afford a case of beer?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Rural Development.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Canada wants the investment that this budget affords all Canada needs, and we're going to stand in support of rural Canada, Mr. Speaker. And in Saskatchewan, I'm going to tell our MPs, the Conservative MPs, Saskatchewan is watching.
Let's just back it up a second. Like if we back it up a second, we're gonna see Buckley be as drunk as he looks. Like, Boulanger is a total trash troll, a mess. I don't care if you think like Inuit had it rough or whatever. Like, this guy is a troll, a drunk bastard in the House of Commons. Like, it's nuts. Watch him.
Thank you very much, Mr.
He's
Speaker.
drunk.
Canada wants the investment that this budget affords all Canada needs, and we're going to stand in support of rural Canada, Mr. Speaker. And in Saskatchewan, I'm going to tell our MPs, the Conservative MPs, Saskatchewan is watching, and all we're asking you guys to do was what you've been doing for the last 10 years on the budget vote. Sit this one out so that Saskatchewan can finally get help from the province to reach its full potential. Come on board.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
There was much hype about this budget. Much has already been made public in the pre-budget announcements. My question is not about is what is not in the budget. The impact of the 15% cut across most departments, including the loss of 40,000 workers, is buried in buzzwords like streamlining, modernizing, and recalibrating. Will the Prime Minister tell Canadians what programs are being cut, which ones will end when the funding sunsets, and how people in our communities will be impacted? Canadians deserve to know.
Hear, hear.
Honorable Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the very important question that she asked. I think she will have seen in the budget that we remain true to our values, Mr. Speaker, Canadian values. We made sure that while we do a budget which is focused on the future and investment, that we protect people, that we protect childcare, that we protect pharmacare, that we protect dental care. You know what, Mr. Speaker? Because we understand on this side of the House that affordability and supporting Canadians at a time like this is essential, but at the same time, we're going to build a great future, Mr. Speaker. We're going to take care of Canadians today because we believe in Canada.
Honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
It's increasingly clear that this government's budget fails to deliver the transformational change promised and fails to meet the moment. It fails to provide any relief right now for the millions of Canadians suffering through an affordability crisis. 60% are having trouble meeting their monthly expenses. Half are using credit cards or borrowing money for daily needs, paying interest rates of 19% or more. Why did the Liberals fail to provide concrete measures to help the millions of Canadians who need help now?
Honorable Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad for the question from my colleague. It's a very important question, and he will remember that the first thing we did for Canadians was to cut tax for 22 million Canadians because we understand that affordability is at the heart of the concerns of Canadians. But more than that, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you will have seen in the budget an initiative that I know he supports because we talked about that, Mr. Speaker, when we made automatic benefits to Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That's the way we want to do. We want to cut red tape, support Canadians, and build a great country together.
Alors, ça met fin à la période.
And that ends oral questions.
All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up right there. It would seem like my name's Aaron.
And
this is
we're
Canadian
expecting
Looney.
an important question.
Shut up. Question period. Be quiet. My name is Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. We watch these politics like so many hours a week, so many hours of the day. I know that it would seem like I'm a conservative. I'm just someone that cares about people in the grocery store lineup. I swear that's all it's really about for me. And the fact that these liberals are duping all of those people, thinking that they're fighting in their direction or whatever. They're a bunch of masochists, man. They're a gross bunch of sadist people that want to drag us down under the guise of being good people or just incompetent or stupid or negligent, whatever it is. Like, they want to hide behind an excuse. Just do a good job. Like, work for your constituents, like read the studies, see how things are going, look at the crime rates and the homeless rates. Like, because the homeless rate is this term that they've just put on many things that are happening. That's mental unhealth. That's also a very low level of employment and economic stability. There's such a mess going on. It's so frustrating to watch all of this. Also, all of these liberals have sold out their souls to the devil, to the bank, to whoever. Like, they have no human value left in them. Mark Carney is a perfect example. He doesn't give a shit about you, your grandchildren, your future. any of those things. He only cares about lining his and Brookfield's pockets with your cash by doing very dishonest things that make no practical sense for a nation when a nation should be trying to develop. One as rich as our nation is in space and economic resources. Like, Mark Carney is a total see you next later Tuesday. He is the worst of the worst. He's got his cabinet of corruption and conspiracy. We'll kick it off with Chrystia Freeland. She flew off to launder your tax money to the Ukraine under a guise of helping out the Ukraine. Ukraine isn't part of the G7. It's not a part of anything other than a distraction to be able to steal your money from your pockets as taxpayers. Like, I know that everybody here is pretty educated, but like, Carney is the devil. There's no doubt about it. He doesn't care one bit, one scrum about anybody in your family, their future, jobs, whatever in Canada. He wants them in the United States anyways. That would be better for Brookfield. It's just like, this is the part I don't get. Like, I understand I have a small audience here. It's great. I appreciate every part of my small audience. But they have the money to promote their dumb shit to naive Canadians. And they'll believe it. Like, well, the Prime Minister said it. Why wouldn't you believe it? Well, the reason you shouldn't believe that is because the Prime Minister currently is a piece of trash, a hateful, fearmonger, bank-rolling, snake oil salesman that is trying to dupe everybody, and he does not care about your health care or your parents' health care or your kids or grandkids. He hates us all. Mark Carney is... I can't believe that somebody doesn't just get rid of him in the first place, but it won't be me, but I couldn't blame anybody that did. I don't mean to wrap it up on such a lowly note, but Mark Carney is a con man trying to dupe all the simple Canadians, trying to take advantage of that using hockey metaphors, sports metaphors, dates on Grey Cups, and he should be dragged out into the street and reckoned with by the people. Mark Carney, you're a slumlord millionaire. Good luck on you, man.